Yeah, it's kind of something that used to happen a lot when Tempo Mage used to be really popular. This was back when one mana Mana Worm existed, and it was kind of a race. Could Druid gain enough armor before, or could the Mage put enough damage first? And there's some cards that really, really impact the matchup. Things like Malfurion used to be absolutely huge in this, and I don't know if they have Malfurion in there. They do, right? They do have Malfurion.
In the Hakar Druid, I don't believe
no, they
so.
don't. They don't have it. So that's actually a really big thing here. Biology Project, obviously not a card that normally you don't really want to give the aggressive decks more mana. So cards like Ferocious Howl are really important though. It cycles through the deck, gives you a bunch of armor, and it's a turn 3 play in the deck that often you don't really have a lot of proactive stuff to be doing on turn 3.
I think the Hakar Druid is going to be holding on to that Biology Project and trying to use it for a really amazing Gadgetzan Auctioneer turn in a bit.
Yeah, definitely. I think that kind of makes a lot more sense than just trying to sort of accelerate the game now, because they want to accelerate the game when they're cycling through their deck. If you look at the Hakar Druid's hand, what are you accelerating into? An Acolyte of Pain it would have been. It's not really where you want to be. So I think this makes a lot of sense. Branching Paths obviously a very key tool as well. Very flexible card. So against tempo decks, often you do end up using it for armor. Sometimes you sort of do a hybrid where you go like one draw, one armor, just to sort of buy you into the next turn where you're going to, cycle more cards.
But yeah, jamming the Ferocious Howl on curve seems good to me. Gains 6 armor that turn, sets up for, as you said, the Branching Paths next turn. I think Dawn would prefer to draw with Branching Paths at this point, if he possibly can. He wants just a few more of those key tools to get that Gadgetzan Auctioneer going on turn 6. Maybe an Innovate, for example.
Yeah, definitely. It's really rough to just play the Gadgetzan on 6. It's basically never going to stick against a mage that has a 2 damage hero power. And obviously setting up a secret here is pretty key too, because it means the Dawn has to check for the secrets, because you really don't want to play Branching Paths into Counterspell, but Biology Project into Counterspell is maybe really, really powerful. It means that next turn you're most likely going to be able to do something like Branching Paths into Naturalize if you want to just try and remove their threats, and sort of cycle through your deck to sort of accelerate your game plan, slow them down a bit in terms of tempo. Here we see Killiness has a really awkward turn here, because if you play the explosive runes now, you tell Dawn what secret it is, so it loses that element of figuring out what do I need to play around versus what, in which case, do I need to, is it worth playing around X secret? But whereas, you're just saying, oh, it is these secrets. But you do have the option of just pushing damage with the hero power, which could be pretty important here, because every damage point counts when the Druid has a lot of armor gain. It's sort of, oh, I have Jan'alai in my deck. If I fit these hero powers in now, I might just be able to play Jan'alai on curve. But opting to look to set up to try for the best Fungal Mancer possible, which makes sense, I think.
And it's going to be really difficult for Dawn to stop that Fungal Mancer, actually. What are we looking at here? Maybe Pyromancer, Biology Project to get rid of the counterspell, and then Wrath? That deals with 2 out of the 3 minions.
The problem is the explosive runes did come down.
Oh, the explosive runes as well, you're right, yeah.
Yeah. So it would actually mean that we're probably just going to see a hero power as opposed to the Pyromancer, just because you really can't. You don't want to take the explosive runes damage and give them Fungal Mancer on this turn. So I think this makes a lot of sense.
These secrets really do mess with this Druid deck. Because, what does Dawn play into that explosive runes? Floop, I guess. It's really awkward.
It is super awkward. If we think about old Druid decks, so they played an Arcane Tyrant, they could stomach taking the 2 damage and just losing the Tyrant. The Tyrant was played for 0 mana. They actually have to invest mana into clearing these explosive runes out now, though, which is really huge.
Then again, I guess Dawn could just play the Auctioneer into the explosive runes, take the damage, and then the following turn floop out the Auctioneer, and then hopefully draw a lot of cards.
Yeah, it's definitely seeming like that's kind of the way this game might be going. But it's still really scary to just say, okay, I'm going to spend 6 mana passing.
Yeah. But unfortunately, that is just part of playing Hakar Druid. In the main win condition of the deck, you get to your final turns where you do have to just go Hakar, Innovate, Spellstone, own Hakar. You're spending the whole 11 mana just passing, essentially.
Yeah, I think that tends to be a little bit better because at least then you're later into the game and you've been able to set up large armor totals to sort of protect yourself. Whereas doing it in the mid game here against a tempo deck in particular is really scary. Like if you just say, "Oh, I'm going to spend my 6 mana turn taking 2 damage," it's suddenly it's just scary.
I mean, I was also thinking about the playing a Wild Pyromancer there, especially as Dawn picked up a second Wild Pyromancer and still had the Floop if he needed another one after that. Obviously, he's afraid of taking the damage from the runes, but he's going to have to take it at some point.
Yeah, it feels like Dawn was trying to maybe set up... Hitting this 3/4 kind of suggests that they're setting up Pyromancer, Floop plus spells, which I guess does make sense that they were looking to do it next turn, but this second Fungalmancer is really going to try and kind of punish that pre-bump, just because that's now out of Pyromancer range. If you play the other Pyromancer, the explosive runes are still in play, we're still taking 4 damage, and then you've got, you know, the extra 3 that you just took from that hero power.
So what can Dawn do? Pyromancer, Floop, Earthen Scales, and Pounce. So he can deal with 2 of the minions.
Yeah, it's just so awkward now. And these naturalizers are key tools for later on as well. They're sort of part of your big burst damage combo with the Hakar. But maybe Dawn can just say, well, I actually just need to outlast the mage's damage here. They don't have Frostlich Jaina, so you know, they don't have infinite damage. They don't have sort of infinite resource generation. But naturalizing these is super, especially going into a Jan'alai turn, when I don't think Jan'alai would be is active in this game. I don't think we've seen enough hero powers, but not having a way to deal with the Ragnaros is so scary as any deck, really. Looks like Dawn is going to be going for the Wild Pyromancer play here. Opting to play the second Wild Pyromancer, which makes sense. It lets you fit in an extra 1 mana spell, which...
Naturalized, though. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but Ragnaros is going to come down next turn. Oh, actually, I'm not sure if Callens has played the hero power enough.
I don't think there's enough hero powers played yet, so that kind of informs Dawn's play here a little bit. But I think it's just so important that you clear this board and try and stem the bleeding a little bit. You've got the branching path to sort of recover some life here.
Wow, Cinderstorm picked up with the hero power. That's 7 damage, 8, 9, 10 with the arcane missiles available this turn for Kylans. He's 2 off lethal.
Do we know how close it was to the Jan'alai being active?
I'm afraid we don't know.
No, I think there was 1 ping, maybe.
But he didn't ping that turn, which is very surprising to me.
I think there's only 1 ping played. Sorry, I should have been...
Oh, sorry, right, okay.
Yeah, so I think it's actually quite far off being active. So it does make sense, just get minions in play. Yep. Your opponent did just take a lot of damage removing the minions last time. You saw a lot of resources get committed, so it kind of makes sense. And yeah, Dawn just going to go for this Gadget Zan Auctioneer. Hope that this is able to get some work done. And choosing not to neutralize this Vicious Fledgling. Just going to cycle more cards with the Auctioneer.
Moonfire.
Actually finds the Moonfire with
what a pickup.
So able to pick up, clear the Fledgling.
Did you hear the crowd then?
So huge.
I just heard the crowd roaring.
I think they're pretty clear who they're rooting for in their hometown. And on the backswing now for Killiness, there's no easy way to remove this Auctioneer. It's kind of like, well, Cinderstorm just has to hit it a bunch and then we have to trade, and it's not really where Killiness wants to be with this. And that
it hit it twice. That's enough because
that's actually probably the best damage split you could get there, because you're not wasting any damage with the ping or the trade there.
But Dawn is so close to stabilizing for now, having drawn the second Auctioneer. So he's got Auctioneer, he's got Barkskin available this turn. He's actually going to play the cheaper one so that he can play Branching Paths as well if he has to.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because there's a lot of cards in the deck that you're not going to be able to cycle with here, and this lets you important here. And I think it's going to depend on the first cycle. So we see a Spellstone, so there's a lot of merit to at least armoring up once now. There is another Gadget Zan as well, so I think this is a really smart play from Dawn, given the option for the branching. And oh wow, that was another crowd roar, I think, about Innovate, because that Armageddon now lets you clear this, and this Gadget Zan is threatening to stick now, which is so key.
So the one problem for Dawn here is that in order to do the Dream Hakar combo, you need to hold back an Innovate and a Spellstone to deal with the Hakar on turn 10. But honestly, I think quite rightly, Dawn is just focusing on surviving right now.
Yeah, but also we have to. How does the Archmage remove the effect of Hakar? What stops Dawn playing the Hakar and it being in play? Normally you have to innovate the Spellstone or something because it's against things like Odd Warrior, which run Ironbeak Owl, or some sort of Hex or Polymorph effect in other decks. But this Odd Mage does not have any of those available.
No, you're right. I just double checked the list, and there is no way to transform the Hakar or silence the Hakar, so he doesn't need to hold on to Innovate Spellstone. He obviously... Okay, so not removing it straight away does create a tiny other issue, which might not be relevant, but it means that if it survives into the next turn, then you have to sacrifice it yourself, and then there's one less Corrupted Blood in the deck for you to swap over and give to the opponent, which means the OTK isn't quite as much damage. But that probably just doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things.
But it also means that you can do things like, let's say Dawn just chose to play it next turn and then was able to kill it on the following turn. You can draw a blood or two and shuffle more into the deck so that when you actually do eventually swap the decks, there is so much more damage available.
That's true. This next turn might even be reasonable to play it. Dawn isn't staring down lethal damage just yet. He can play the Biology Project as well as the Hakar this turn. He can play the Biology Project first if he wanted to draw.
Yeah, I think
he has 3 cards left.
Maybe just going to save that for the second Gadget Zan if that's something that he wanted to do. I'm not sure if it is, but there's no reason to play it this turn, I think, because you can always cycle it with the second Gadget.
Okay.
I think that's what Dawn is thinking here. But yeah, I really like this. There's no lethal backswing available. There's no way you die here, so I really, really like this, just tempoing the Hakar out.
Again, 11 damage available for Kylan's here with the Hero Power and the Blaze Caller. And the 4 damage on board.
Yeah, and this is super awkward for Kylan, Do you prioritize killing this Gadget Zan Auctioneer? Do you kill the Hakar so that, what if the Druid just says, oh, I'm just going to hit you with Hakar a couple of times, actually? Yeah. Gonna use my Spellstone as removal. I'll trade the Hakar eventually, but
well, yeah, Hakar is even removal here. Like if Kylan plays Blaze Caller and doesn't deal with the Hakar, then Hakar just trades with the Blaze Caller.
Yeah, it's just so scary for Kylan. This is the thing that I think Hakar's really good for the game because it creates really interesting and unique situations. Like prior to Hakar, this has never been a situation where you have to think, how much do I need to kill this minion? Am I scared of them drawing it? Right. Am I scared of, if they draw it, can they just swap and kill me?
But is that the Ragnaros active there, finally, for Kylan's?
Yeah, so this is a pretty important Ragnaros hit, I think. I'm not actually sure what's better, but definitely changed the outcome of the game.
Ooh, Dawn got a Corrupted Blood. Now, this is so complicated because he still has a few cards left in his deck. I think now is probably the time for him to switch decks and play Naturalize, but I'm worried it's not lethal.
4 cards left in deck, so that means there are 2 bloods in that deck and 2 actual cards.
So if 2 cards are drawn by the Naturalize, there is a chance that both of the other cards are drawn, which would just end the game.
Yeah, you would take 6 damage on the backswing plus the 1 fatigue, so that's 7, and then you would just switch decks back, and that would be the game over. Yep. So that doesn't really seem like an option.
So it appears that he has to wait, but he can't kill the Ragnaros. Maybe he just has to play Auctioneer and hope that the Ragnaros hits that rather than the face.
But then they could just trade the Jan'alai into the Auctioneer, and then if you play the Auctioneer, if you play any spells, you're risking drawing the Bloods. I think it's actually just the Togwag or Naturalize and Hope kind of plan here.
Okay, I like it. Question is, how many bloods can he get from this first naturalized draw? That's a blood.
Okay,
That's good.
the first card to blood. That's really, really important here. Second card was blood as well.
Okay, so he gets another blood from the second draw. And now it's just the natural draw from the deck available to Dawn. He's actually going to... Oh, I thought he was going to... Oh, his spellstone's not upgraded. I thought he was going to deal with the Jan'alai and hope to deal a tiny bit more damage with Tog next turn.
Yeah, so the thing is, if lots of bloods go in here, does the deck not just get switched back and then...
And then Dawn just dies on...
Yeah, Dawn just dies, because it doesn't look like enough bloods have been drawn.
I don't think it's quite lethal, no. And there's the fatigue damage after that. It's only one.
Yeah, it's one blood off lethal.
Kylan survives.
So...
He's going to switch the decks back, and Dawn is just going to lose to his own corrupted bloods.
Oh, that was so close. I think Dawn sort of said, "Oh well, Ragnaros can't be in hand."
Okay,
right?
I hate to say this, Toast Monster, but thinking back to that previous turn, you know the turn that I said he could play Biology Project and then play the Hakar? He'd have drawn one more card through his deck with the Gadgetzan Auctioneer, and maybe that would have been the difference between lethal and not lethal. So I really do think the draw was the correct play back then.
I think Dawn was thinking that Ragnaros wasn't available in hand or anything because it would have come down already, maybe not tracking the pings. And I think it was really the Ragnaros that accelerated the clock in that game.
But like,
if Ragnaros didn't come down, then the Naturalized could have been held for a turn, and you could have just played it slowly, I think.
But what was he holding on to the Biology Project for? Like, what else does it do apart from draw an extra card at that point in the game?
Yeah, maybe you are just forcing yourself to play the gadget at some point. Maybe you're right, and it should have just come down then.
Either way, can you tell I've been playing some Hakar Druid recently, by the way? I really love the deck. I just... Anything like Togwoggle and Hakar, where you have to really think outside of the box and try and get some strange win conditions, I think it's really cool for Hearthstone.
Yeah, like I said, when there's the gadget and the Hakar on board, and it's like, have you ever been in that board state where there's a card that's going to put damage cards into yours and your opponent's deck, and there's a Gadgetzan on board? It's just interesting. It creates board states that people have not seen before, and I think that's really important.
Either way, the Odd Mage does win the first game of the series up against the Hakar Druid, and that leaves Cloud9 having to find a counter for the Odd Mage. Now, Toast Monster, what do you think counters the Odd Mage?
The Odd Mage is usually countered by decks that just play lots of early removal. Druid is usually actually pretty good for it because it plays things like Wrath, Spellstones, and lots of armor gain. But in terms of what Cloud9 have left, it's not looking great for them. Maybe they play something like Hakar Paladin, and they just sort of say, oh, well, we can actually just... We're a mid-ranged style deck that runs some card draw, has some healing with the flash of lights and things like that, plays Call to Arms, which is very, very, very powerful, obviously, even at 5 mana. So maybe they just say that and they say, oh, well, we can just, fight you on board and then try and do our Hakar plan later if it comes to that.
So what you're telling me is Cloud9 really, really like Hakar?
I think someone on their team, at least one person, has convinced the others that Hakar is just the best card and we should play all the Hakars we can.
Another option is Dead Man's Hand Warrior. I don't think that seems particularly strong against Odd Mage, though.
I'm not too sure. It does run lots of removal and it has, it does have a lot of armor gain potential. They are running Keening Banshee as well, which I think is really spicy. Just to cycle through their deck very aggressively. It probably isn't the answer because it's not it has the Dry Whiskerer to gain armor, but it's not, and like shield blocks, but it's really hard to get to the point where you just have sort of like a 5 or 6 card hand that you're just cycling endlessly. And it's maybe a little bit too slow for that, so it might not be the answer.
Quest Rogue is probably a little bit slow and maybe a little bit too weak to Ragnaros. Obviously, Quest Rogue does tend to struggle against decks like Aggro Mage of old, and I guess this matchup wouldn't be too different.
Yeah, I mean, Explosive Runes is really the card that made Aggro Mage of old so good for Quest Rogue because they have to invest mana into taking damage, which is just... I mean, there's no card like that, right, where you have to invest mana into taking damage yourself so that you can play other things that don't take damage. And Explosive Runes is just great at just closing games out early against decks that don't run healing. And Quest Rogue, although it does run some healing, it takes a while to come online with Vicious Scale Hide, because when it's just healing you for 1, it's not really that great.
And final choice is actually the Quest Mage, which seems like it's just going to be taking damage whilst not pressuring the odd mage back. I'm not sure I like that choice either. So
it does run a lot of stall though, you know. It runs things like Frost Novas and Blizzards and things like that. So maybe it's good enough to stall, and you can play Doomsayers. And odd mage does, if it doesn't have an explosive runes in play, it struggles to deal with the Doomsayer.
None of that struggles. Sorry, I was gonna say none of that stops the hero power or the Ragnaros though, unfortunately.
No, that is true. That's the issue it does have. That over the top damage is just very difficult to stop. But you know, odd mage doesn't really have an answer to Frost Nova Doomsayer. It looks like they're not going to go with the warrior though.
Dead Man's Hand Warrior. Now we saw plenty of gameplay from this deck yesterday. We saw a Dead Man's Hand Mirror yesterday. I don't expect this game to be quite as well, a tie like yesterday's, but I am excited for this one. Cloud9's Dead Man's Hand Warrior runs the Keening Banshee. Derek and I weren't entirely sure what the mechanic or how exactly that card works with Dead Man's Hand, but as it happens, if you play the Dead Man's Hand with an empty deck with Keening Banshee on the board, she tries to mill 3 cards first, nothing happens, and then the hand gets shuffled in.
I think that makes sense because the card says whenever, right? As opposed to after. So whenever happens before the card's effect happens, after would obviously be after, would do it after the effect. So that does make sense. Keening Banshee was one that people, when Mechathune decks were announced, people thought Keening Banshee might be a good card because you could not play it, similar to how Mechathune Warlock plays Solarium. Actually.
Yes, yeah.
People were thinking that you would actually be able to just hold on to it until you've got the combo pieces, and then you could just Keening Banshee and cycle aggressively through your deck. But that never really happened. I think the other Mechathune builds were just a bit more streamlined. But it's nice to see they've taken that idea and just put it into their Dead Man's Hand Warrior.
These are some great bits of artwork for the teams. Well, look at that. Cloud9.
Yeah, it's like they've got like a caricature artist in just before their games, and obviously some fan art as well, a little Murloc drawing. And you said you could read Korean earlier, right? So what's the Murloc saying? I'll give you an A for effort on that one.
I definitely didn't put that much effort into it. I don't deserve an A for that one.
An A for participation then.
I'll take that one. So, do you think Dry Whisker Armorer is going to be one of the key cards in this matchup then? What's the Dead Man's Hand Warriors game plan here?
So I think it's, to start with, it's obviously just to live against the mage. But I think their aim is going to be to get to a super narrow set of cards that they just keep drawing and shuffling back into their deck. So things like a Warpath potentially up there for removal. Blood Razor, probably not a card you want to keep shuffling into your deck, but definitely early game it really helps remove a lot of the 3-drops that are 3/3s, things like that. The Dry Whisker Armorer has really nice synergy with the Cornered Sentry because that summons 3 1/1 minions, you gain the armor, and then you play things like swinging your Blood Razor that you set up the previous turn to clear the 1/1s, or Warpath to clear them up, and you just gain so much armor with that. And Shield Block as well is a really nice card. If you can get your hand to be things like the Dead Man's Hand and Shield Block, you can just gain so much armor and so aggressively cycle through your deck that you just keep drawing the removal that you've shuffled into your deck, the armor gain, and the Dead Man's Hand. So you just infinitely keep removal, keep armor gain, and just run them out of resources like that.
They got Cloud9 glow stick things and everything. Amazing.
Yeah, I wonder if that's sort of like official merchandise or if that's sort of fan-made stuff. Because I've not really seen anything like that, I don't think, at
they have all sorts of official merchandise over there in South Korea. There's loads of cool Hearthstone merchandise, team merchandise you can find. Again, and it's just another sign of how much effort and how much of a big deal esports is over there.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Yeah, so we're into game 1. Obviously, the mage has some early game here. Black Cat as well. Pretty powerful on 3. Draws a card, gets a 3/3 into play. And looking like not keeping any of that for the warrior. Going to be looking for early game removal, I think. I think Blood Razor in particular is really good because they play a 3-drop on 3. that's off on a 3/3. You play Blood Razor into it, set up the second swing of Blood Razor as well, and get removal. That's just a really powerful early turn. We do see the early Dead Man's Hand draw, which is not the best if they're planning to go infinite. They might not even plan to go infinite, though. What they could do, as Diane could do, is just, oh, my hand's really good right now. These are cards I'm happy to draw again. I don't need to go infinite into fatigue here. You know, the mage does fatigue at some point. They could just say, oh, these 6 cards are great. I'm going to shuffle all of these into my deck. It's unlikely, I think, that that'd be the game plan, but it's definitely an option you can do as Dead Man's Hand Warrior, especially when you're just saying, I'm going to shuffle, you know, maybe 12 to 15 cards just into my deck. You are going to win those in fatigue then.
Right.
Even when you draw more aggressively than the other deck does.
But straight away, the mage slamming that Vicious Fledgling on the board, and Dione doesn't have anything he can do to deal with it this turn. That good old execute nerf causing his hand some grief there. If that thing gets Wind Fury and Stealth next turn, Dione might be in trouble.
Yeah, the Vicious Fledglings still as scary as ever. They're not getting innovated out anymore, but they are still getting coined out, and that is still just spooky because, like you said, if they get Wind Fury, and then most defensive options, to be honest, are just so hard to deal with. Obviously, Execute does kind of cheat on that because health's then not a defensive option that's viable. But yeah, just super scary.
So while this game is just starting up, something I should announce very quickly. Yesterday, there was a Dead Man's Hand mirror, which ended in a tie. And we were a little bit unsure as to why that meant the teams had to play a regame. The reason for that is that apparently the rules in Korea and the rules in China for what happens when you tie a Dead Man's Hand mirror are different. In China, it's the whoever has more health and armor player, that's the player that wins the game and we move on. In Korea, apparently the ruling is you regame. So Cloud9 wasn't playing to try and get as much health and armor as possible. If they knew that, they would have played differently with their Dry Whisker armorers and cornered sentries, etc. So as a result, the organizers decided the only fair thing to do was regame and inform both players, okay, for this game the rule is the player with the most health wins. And apparently in that game, Cloud9 won very, very easily because they knew what the game plan was.
Yeah. And meanwhile, while you're explaining that, the scary thing you said with the Vicious Fledgling happened.
Oh, so it did.
Wind Fury and then Stealth. So it's going to hit for at least 6 next turn, but you've got to be thinking they're looking for more damage and more defensive options. So things like can't be targeted and health, can't be targeted Divine Shield, suddenly gets super scary because it blocks Blood Razor, blocks Executes, things like that. Just super, super scary. Even Stealth again is worrying because it's just going to keep hitting you for 6.
But the thing is, and I was wondering, I was busy explaining the thing from yesterday, but I was wondering last turn if maybe Dione should just try and deal as much damage to the Fledgling while he had the chance. Like if he just cast the Slam last turn, then this Blood Razor Battlecry would have finished off the Fledgling. It wouldn't be a problem anymore. But because instead he just developed the Dry Whisker Armorer, he now doesn't have a way of dealing with the Fledgling, and this one card could just win the game. If this gets untargetable and a health buff or something this turn, Divine Shield, I guess, is the health buff?
I think 3 attack as well, because it's just going to push so much damage. And you're saying, well, you know, they might have to swing this Blood Razor into this.
He found Stealth!
Oh, so you've learned Korean.
Yeah, I just know the picture.
You could have fooled us all there.
That's the great thing about being a Hearthstone caster is that you do learn how to tell like what card is what just from a tiny little bit of the corner of the card.
Yeah.
So you can just about see the purple of the Stealth there.
You're seeing a 6 and an orange, and you're like, oh, that's just a golden skulking ghost.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, I actually maybe would have liked to have seen that Slam. I understood the Dry Whisker, but the problem is, you know, the Mage Hero Power has, so you're blocking their 3. And you're saying, well, it's not that likely that the worst case Fledgling happens. But was the play against the worst case Fledgling even that bad? Opting to just weave the pings in here, fit the damage in, which kind of makes sense with this sort of hand where you've got this Fledgling on board as well that's just going to keep pushing damage. You want to fit these pings in.
Dione just has to brawl here. There's no question.
Yeah,
If the fledgling
yeah,
wins the brawl, Donny just loses the game.
yeah. That will just be game over. And it
What?
happened. And yeah, that's going to be game. The Fungal Mats will come down, and that
Or
will
the
just end it.
yeah, Fungal Mancer or Missiles Ping. It just doesn't matter. Kylan's has lethal here. Donny cannot believe that his counter pick ended this miserably.
Yeah, this is not going to go well. And I mean, the crazy thing is, like you said, if he'd used the slam, this wouldn't have happened. There were plays around this that would have meant this outcome was fine. This just wouldn't be the position you're in now. Opts for the poisonous, finds out the poisonous isn't lethal, but arcane missiles and ping gonna close the game out.
Well,
Both of them are
there
laughing
you
about
go.
it, so at least they're in good spirits. Not too disappointed.
I just don't know what to say. Things are not looking good for Cloud9 now, as they need to yet again try and find a counter for this odd mage, which is doing some serious work and might actually sweep this series. We'll be back in a few moments for potentially the final game of this series. Can Cloud9 pull this back, or are we looking at a potential sweep from RNG? Don't go anywhere. Korea versus China coming up. Welcome back to Korea versus China, where Korea are on their last legs here. If Cloud9 lose one more game, then all Korean teams have been eliminated from this tournament.
Yeah, we'll be looking at an all-Chinese final there. I mean, this series has not gone the way for Cloud9. They weren't able to get it done with Hikar. They were 3 off lethal with the Hikar Druid. The Dead Man's Hand Warrior died on turn 5 there against the Odd Mage as well. So Odd Mage looking super powerful against Cloud9 right now.
We are just about to find out what deck Cloud9 are going to try and queue into the Odd Mage this time. And honestly, this is where you hate to be in last hero standing. You want to win the counter queue. That's the whole point of the counter queue. If you lose the counter queue, then in theory, your best, or what you feel is your best deck against the opponent's deck is gone. That leaves you with, well, worse decks, I guess.
Yeah, that's the only way really to look at it. I mean, we say counter queue. The matchups aren't, it's not 100-0. Otherwise,
of course,
we wouldn't play Hearthstone. We would just say, I play this, and then that's it, right?
Yeah.
But you definitely want to be picking your favourables into this. And it looks like they are going with the Quest Rogue.
Okay. Now, Flurry actually managed to get a sweep with the Quest Rogue yesterday. I think it was a reverse sweep as well. So
I think it makes sense. If we look at the other decks available, you're now not looking at just winning this game, right? Because winning this game by itself is now no longer good enough. You need to win every game now. And they're saying, look, Quest Rogue has the best chance for us. They're going to play their Mage, they're going to play their Zoo, and then if we can beat those, we just are in a favourable. And Quest Rogue gives us the best chances of this.
Yep. I don't think... Oh, yeah. I mean, apart from the Zoo, RNG don't have any particularly good matchups against the Quest Rogue. But it is going to be hard for Quest Rogue to both win this matchup and then beat Zoo after that. It's, I guess it's the best chance they've got, but it's a long shot.
Yeah, I mean, Quest Rogue is one of those decks that, when it's piloted at the absolute highest level, it really does just look so incredible. It has ways of just maneuvering situations that you really think, you're looking at it and you're like, no, there's no way. And then the best Quest Rogue players in the world, people like Teray, killing all day, just find the way. And I think Flurry's one of those players.
He's definitely shown a lot of skill with this deck. I mean, in his sweep with it yesterday, I believe he beat an Odd Paladin. Or it may have been Aggro Mage, actually. He definitely beat one of those two decks with Quest Rogue. So he's shown he can do it. He can win those bad matchups.
Yeah, I mean, it is just, they are saying, look, we need this to win the series now. I do not think they've thought Quest Rogue is our best pick into this. They are now saying, we're doing this to win the series, which I think is it's really smart approach to these sort of situations. It's very easy to say, right, well, we just need to win this game, and then we can just, that's it. But they've recognized that's probably why it took them so long to sort of try and figure out what their best deck to pick now is, because they're saying, how do we win this series? And so often Hearthstone is about that, playing to your outs is something people talk about all the time. And they're not just playing to their outs this game, they're playing to outs this series.
Exactly. And again, a lot rests on Flurry's shoulders now. I'm sure the Korean commentators are going to be a little bit biased there. They're going to be rooting for Flurry. A lot of the people live in that venue are going to be rooting for Flurry because, again, it's the local team. Huh?
Sorry, I thought we lost you for a second there.
Oh, sorry about that.
Seems to be okay.
Yeah, I think the local team.
I think the audience are there to see Cloud9 win at this point. I mean, they're there to see great Hearthstone, but they also want their team to be winning, right? That national pride, especially, I think that's something that's so big in Korea as well. National pride of winning this tournament would be huge. It's the Korea vs China Invitational, seeing the trophy there. But it looks like we are ready to get into this game. It's going to be Cloud9 again on the Odd Mage and Flurry on the Quest Rogue.
And already I can hear the crowd cheering. They really want Flurry to win this game.
Yeah, and Flurry full kept this. This is a really good hand for beating aggressive decks. You have both Wax Elementals. You have a bounce. That's 3 on the quest already. The Wax Elementals are so hard to clear. But if we look at the other side, there's a 1-drop into, Hero Power on 2 is obviously kind of the standard for an odd deck with no coin, into Kirin Tor Secret. So both players actually full kept their hand here. That's super scary for both of them. We see Kylan just going to not hold this Glacial Shard, just saying, I want this damage to come out, and I want to just aggressively push. Glacial Shard as well, a very key tool as well, because stopping, 4 damage, hitting you even once, it's not sometimes just the break point between stabilizing with a Vicious Scalehide and not.
So, Flurry this turn, is there any chance he just slams both Waxes? No, he's actually going to... Wow, that was a very quick play.
Yeah, I think it was maybe worth considering, but the dagger is nice to have up, and it's kind of never getting better than that, right? And also, going into a turn 3 when they full keep, you're kind of expecting a secret, right? And playing Wax Alley into Explosive Runes is actually perfectly fine. Because the minion still sticks, right? And you only take the 4 damage, it just costs you the Divine Shield.
It's pretty much the best case scenario, isn't it?
Yeah, it is just the best minion to play into it.
So they'll probably play at least one of these Wax Elementals this turn, along with potentially Glacial Shard. Maybe they'll bounce it back.
Yeah, I think when you play the Wax Elements, when you see that it's Counterspell, you're a little bit scared to bounce it back because you don't want to take the 4 damage from the Kirin Tor Mage. But it does develop the minion that contests. I think we might see something like double Wax Ellie and a Glacial Shard potentially here.
Okay.
Yeah, so now they know that it's Counterspell, because they know the list that that RNG have brought. There's only Explosive Runes and 1 Counterspell. And there only being 1 Counterspell is really key as well. It means that this coin, if it does get used to proc the Counterspell at some point, there's going to be no follow-up Counterspell to block the quest completion. We see just a very awkward turn for Kylan here, just having to hero power down the Glacial Shard and pass. And this is where we probably just see a Youthful Brewmaster come down, bounce one of these Wax Ellies. If we count the Brewmasters in hand, there's actually 4 Wax Elementals here now.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
1 more is quest, and like I was saying, there's no counterspell for that quest. This is the hand that Flurry wants for this kind of matchup.
I like the deck hand here, actually, just because that and the weapon does clear up the Kirin Tor Mage. Then Flurry can, he's got 3 mana remaining. He can bounce one of these Waxes if he wants to play it really safe. I guess that would be playing around some sort of rogue Cinderstorm or something. Like any disaster that would somehow clear this board. Cinderstorm plus missiles, I don't know.
Yeah, and also it lets you maybe just go Wax Elemental into Elven Minstrel next turn. And it develops the minion, which is nice. Not the draw for Kylan here either. The Explosive Rune's not too powerful. This is something that this deck, because this Odd Mage doesn't really have as much burn as traditional aggro mage does, it means that if you don't get the minion damage in early, like there, Flurry took the 4 damage on the dagger, right? That's okay against this deck in particular, just because what are they going to do? They don't have fireballs and frostbolts to shoot at your face. It's just missiles damage, and you can play around missile damage. Going wide on the board does just reduce the chance of missile damage will go face.
It probably is worth pointing out here that Flurry is now down to 16 health. It's very possible for the mage to deal that damage over the next few turns.
Yeah, if a couple of Ragnaros shots go your way, that's just it, right? 2 Ragnaros shots. The pings have been coming in because Kylan has just not had the best hand. He had the 1-drop and then the 3-drop and secret on 3, but Odd Mage doesn't run card draw. That runs you out of cards pretty quickly.
But because the pings have been coming in, now Ragnaros coming out will sort of make that feel less like a punishment. Like, yeah, okay, I had nothing else to play, but now here's the reward.
Yeah, I believe the Ragnaros is live here, going into this turn. So that is very, very key for Kylan here, because I mean, you just want those Ragnaros shots to go face, right? If one goes face, it ends up into a Divine Shield, or to be honest, even just into an O2 isn't great for you. It's not where you want to be. And yeah, it's looking like that might just be the way Kylan can win. So yeah, the Janlei is live, a Cinderstorm pickup as well.
Ooh.
So knock off the Divine Shield, and then the Ragnaros. This is a very key hit here.
Really hoping this goes face. Then they've got the The one drop, the Cinderstorm next turn for the hero power. It's a miss. It does hit the minion. And the Vanish drawn by Flurry. Okay, now this is complicated because the problem with the Vanish is it allows Kylins to summon 2 Ragnaros over the next few turns.
Yeah, this is not the one they want, is it? I mean...
But does he just have to do it anyway? Vanish Wax? It's the last Wax as well.
Yeah, the problem there is if they have missiles, any kind of missiles, Cinderstorm or Arcane, they can just ping the Wax and say, well, you know, you were doing quest completion on that, so what are you going to do now? So this is so awkward for Flurry now.
So they could play Wax first and then Vanish? But
yeah,
then they're
just
guaranteed...
taking the 8, yeah. Looks like they are going to go for the Vanish into the Wax, which does leave them vulnerable to missiles, but maybe that's just a position they have to be in here. I wonder if they could have just played the deckhand here and said it has to be exactly Arcane missiles that you have to guarantee the 8.
No, maybe. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Hadn't thought about that. Either way, Ragnaros is going to come down anyway, so the missiles isn't going to punish this Wax Elemental. If this hits the Divine Shield, which it does,
that's
crowd goes
so huge
wild.
for Flurry, yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously, a Divine Shield soaking 8 when you're on 15 is absolutely huge. Yeah, it's just this Wax Ellie is going to get bounced. Minstrel can come down to refill the hand.
But then Kylins gets a second Ragnaros next turn. How long can Flurry realistically survive against 2 Ragnaros?
We might be about to find out. This could just be lethal here if there's the...
He can play...
Ping Jamlai. You can also just Cinderstorm twice and try and guarantee the hit to face, right? Is this lethal? This isn't lethal, right? No, this is, I think.
With the double Cinderstorm,
yeah, the double Cinderstorm's just
lethal. Exact lethal. Kylins gets there. That is the 3-0 sweep. Korea has been eliminated from Korea versus China, and it is going to be an all-China finals. Wow. That was a fast series.